Welcome to In Between Podcasts with your hosts, Sarah and Celeste. Join us every Monday at 4 p.m. on a journey of growth and learn how to be a light to others. This episode is about Celeste's testimony, and in this episode, we will be discussing topics related to suicide and mental health struggles. This content may be distressing or triggering to some listeners. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, please consider reaching out to a mental health professional or contacting a crisis hotline. Your well-being is important to us. Get ready and take a moment to tune in. You're about to listen to episode 3 of In Between Podcasts beginning now. Last week, I did my testimony. If you haven't heard it, please go back and watch it because it was a good one. And just showing like how important, our testimonies are. And even though they're different, like we've came from different, childhoods or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like it's still good to share what God has been doing in your life and, in everybody's life. So,
The way you've done and everything.
yeah. So where it began, where you are now.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear because I haven't heard hers either. So, let's get started and talk about that.
Yeah. I think it takes a huge leap of faith to step out and tell your testimony. But also, it should be something that you talk about a lot more. And I think in our culture, we really don't tell our testimonies that often.
We don't talk about God as often as we should.
Yeah.
I was listening to something. I don't know. This might have been on my TikTok or Instagram or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like we should literally be reading the Bible and talking about it like it's our everyday talk, like in our sentences. So it's not as like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to have to bring up Jesus to this person.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like that. It should be like easily coming out of our mouths. If we're Christians, that's what it should be.
Yeah.
It's like we should be the light and like God showing through us and talking through us.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, obviously we're sitting down and we're giving the longer version of our testimonies for this podcast. But I feel like you should have a short version. Everybody should have a short version of, hey, I was this sinner. I got saved by the power of Jesus. And now I'm this person, Yeah. And we should all be able to say that very well. And I feel like a lot of us, especially me, it took a lot of prep to get here and not be like so nervous to talk about my testimony. It's
that's fun.
Yeah.
I think you're going to do great too.
Yeah, we'll see.
I was nervous too, but
yeah, you did great. If y'all didn't listen to Sarah's podcast, go back, like she said, listen to hers, and we talk about why it's important to tell your testimony. And this week is mine. So, where to start? I would say my childhood was all about God. That is one thing that my parents did very well in directing us and making our home about God. My mom did a real good job about always just singing Jesus songs to us and just always talking to us about God from a very, very young age. I remember waking up, it was so early because my dad would go to work and they would wake us up at like 5 o'clock in the morning as like 2 and 3-year-olds, maybe 4-year-olds. And my dad would sit down every morning and read the Bible to us.
Wow, really?
I cannot tell you I stayed awake the whole time because those Bible words just like put you to sleep. And my dad, he has like a deep voice and it would just like, I'd just be reading and it would just like put me back to sleep early in the morning. But I really felt like God, as a young age, I always felt God's presence.
Okay.
I feel like I started off my relationship with God at a very young age, but I wouldn't say I was a Christian.
Okay.
I would say that Jesus was there with me from a very young age. And I remember praying and like talking to God from a very young age.
Did y'all go to church during those young years?
Yes, but I don't really remember church.
Okay.
I know that we went to several different ones and my parents would help out with youth and do different things.
Okay.
But I don't really remember like Sunday services and stuff like that. I do remember at one point, and I was a little bit older. I think I was maybe like 4 or 5, and we changed churches and went to this little old country church. And y'all, there was maybe like 10 people in it.
Right.
And they were older. They were all a lot older. And my parents were the youngest in the church. But I loved that church and I loved seeing God in those older people. And so even now, like when I go to churches, if I don't see older people in it, I leave.
Really?
Like, yeah, it's so important to me now because I think I saw it at such a young age, the wisdom that older people had in the relationship that they like lived out at a young age. And so anyway, that's a side note. So I don't go to churches if it's all young people. I see some old people in there.
They know what they're talking about.
Yeah. So church was kind of a thing. We went to church, but I don't really remember it. From a young age, I remember my dad reading the Bible and my mom always singing to me, Jesus loves me. Be careful, little hands, what you do, eyes, what you see, song.
It doesn't matter. I don't know what that is.
I'll sing it to you later.
Yeah.
And so at a very young age, I did talk to God a lot and felt his presence from a very young age, from a very young age. When I think I was maybe 4 or 5. One thing my family did was my grandfather was a part of Assemblies of God. And he was a part of the church, like children's ministry. And so he was a part of putting on Assemblies of God church camp. And he was like the director of that. And so every summer we got to go and basically live at this church camp or at this camp, in these campgrounds. And my parents would help out and help him run the children's camp thing.
So like a week long or like a month, like a couple months?
It was like a month.
Okay. Okay.
I think in the beginning it was a little like a month and a half, and then they kept on like shortening it.
Okay.
Because I think each week was like 1 week with each church or like different churches, whatever. But from a very young age, my first memory of me actually saying that I wanted a relationship with God, like, and I sought it, was at church camp. And me and my brother always had to go to the services, but we weren't a part of the campers, so we like sat up in the balcony by ourselves. But my parents and grandfather was like, "No, you have to go." So we saw each child, like children's pastor, do their thing over and over and over. So we knew like what they were gonna do and like the puppet shows and everything and all the songs, like we knew it by heart by the end of the week. Or by the end of the month, especially. But one thing that the pastor said that one night was, it was during the praise and worship at the end and like the altar call. And I was up in the balcony and I remember the pastor being like, if you just want to be God's friend, or if you need God to be your friend, like, because he was like, raise your hands or whatever, raise your arms. And he was like, you can actually like ask God to hold your hand. And I just remember I was like, I want to hold God's hand. And I was like, I want that so bad. I was like, I want to hold God's hand. So I reached up and I grabbed my fist and I brought it down and I was like, I'm holding God's hand. And I was like, and I'm never letting go. And so I like kept my fist clenched for like 30, 45 minutes to an hour. And if you've ever just like clenched your fist that long, as like a 4-year-old, I was like, my hand is getting really tired. And I just remember, I mean, obviously I was 4, so it's kind of comical, like that I was gonna keep my hand closed because it was holding God's hand. But I remember at that moment I was like, okay, God, like my hand's kind of getting tired. And I was like, can I just hold your hand in my heart?
Oh, that is so sweet.
And so I unclenched my hand, but I was like, God, I'll just hold your hand in my heart. And so I do feel like that was a moment in my life where I was like, I really want God. And I was really seeking that, even at 4, even at 4 or 5. I have early memories in my childhood. I would say I could remember back to like when I was 3. But there's like some things in my parents' life that's part of their testimony, and I can remember things back then. But like I said, God was there, and I remember praying to Him at a very young age. But at that moment is when I actually was like, God, you're real, and God, I want to hold your hand, and I want you to be a part of my life. And so that was at like 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
As I grew up from that point, I feel like I kept a relationship with God,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't understand what a daily relationship with Him looked like. Um, I would say I did pray, but I wasn't full surrender. And I wasn't like, your life, like, here's my life. Like,
Yeah.
you can do with it as you please. And so I don't say I actually became a Christian at that point, but I do say that God touched my heart at that point
Okay.
and pushed me in the right direction with a relationship with Him. Definitely.
Yeah.
So when I actually say I was saved and gave my life to Christ was actually on Halloween.
Okay.
It was Halloween. I was 10 at this point. My aunt invited us to a church thing for Halloween, and it was one of those hayride.
I think I've heard this part of it.
It was one of those hayride story things where like somebody dies and then they like get to see hell and then they get to see heaven and then they get another chance at life and then they decide what they want, basically.
Okay.
And it was like a skit, but like you were on this hayride and you're like,
I never went to one of those, but I've heard about them.
it's kind of cheesy. It's real cheesy. But it worked for me.
Yeah.
But anyway, I went through the hayride and my aunt invited us and my grandparents took us. But at that point, at age 10, we were not going to church anymore. My parents had quit going to church. There was a lot of hurt. And my parents felt like they didn't want us to grow up religious, but more relationship with God. And they saw in their own lives that they had kind of just checked a box of like, oh, I'm a Christian because I go to church kind of thing.
What age did y'all stop going then?
I think I was about 6.
Okay, so from 6 to 10? Well, from 6 to you being saved and then
12.
Okay.
Yeah. So we weren't going to church. But still, I mean, my mom really talked about God all the time. Part of our homeschool curriculum, we had to read the Bible every morning. And I would say that I really got very like checky as a Christian during that time, like check the box. I hated reading my Bible every morning. One thing about me is I'm dyslexic. And so every morning we had to get up and read 4 chapters of the Bible. And as a dyslexic person,
4 chapters?
my brother finished reading the whole Bible. It took me forever. I still haven't actually read through the whole Bible. That is one area I still struggle.
Yeah.
But as a dyslexic person, sitting down in the morning time to read 4 chapters of little print Bible, I got so sick every morning. One thing about dyslexia, it can make you nauseous when you read.
Really? I did not know that.
My head would start hurting, my eyes would start burning, and I would be so sick to my stomach. And now I look back and I was like, oh my gosh, it's because I had to read my Bible every morning. And it affected my schoolwork, honestly, because I would get so sick. And my mom would be like, what is the matter with you? And I'd just be like passed out on the couch. and I couldn't do like my schoolwork after reading the
Your
Bible.
mom probably thought like she is faking it.
Yeah, she did. She really did. But it's just kind of dyslexic. So if there's any dyslexic people out there listening, I feel you. The nauseous reading part, and even today, like if I'm on my phone reading or if I have a book, I can only read for so long before I start
Okay.
feeling sick.
Really?
So that's really, the Bible just never really spoke to me. I tried sometimes, like I was like, oh yeah, like I really want God to speak to me. I would start feeling so sick, and
This isn't working.
yeah, yeah. So like I said, Christianity and my relationship with God kind of just became a check during that point, because the Bible was not cutting it for me in building my relationship with God. Um, and so at 10, I was still doing that. And again, it was just a check mark. Went to the Hayride Halloween skit thing. And after you went through like the whole skit, you went through hell, and then you went to heaven and that sort of thing. They had like a tent set up, and a pastor got up and read a little passage or whatever. And he was like, if you don't know like where you're going, like if you haven't actually surrendered your life to Christ and you don't know that today, and you want a relationship with God, he was like, all you have to do is raise your hand, and somebody will come to you and like pull you off to the side, and you can say, talk to them about your decision. And I was like, there's no way I'm raising my hand. I mean, as a 10-year-old, I was like, I'm with my grandparents, my aunt, and my brother. And I was like, there's no way I'm raising my hand. And I was kind of like, like, God, I can tell you're speaking to me through this. And I was kind of like fighting with them, honestly. As a 10-year-old, I was like, there's no way I'm about to raise my hand right now. And I just kept on feeling it in my heart, like, do it, like, do it, like, do it, like, just let's do it. And it just kept on and kept on. And then I was like, okay. And so I raised my hand, and this sweetest little young college girl pulled me off to the side. And I just remember she gave me like the biggest hug. And she was like, I am so happy that you decided to follow God. And I was like, okay, I made the right decision, because she was just so welcoming and so proud, of me. And so then she taught me through the steps, and I gave my life to Christ that night. And when I went back to my brother and aunt and grandparents, they all gave me big hugs. And my brother's not like the biggest hugger, and he was like this much, I was like, good job, But I would say that's when God actually changed my heart. And that actually like changed up, and I was more aware of my sin in my life. And so at 10 is when I really started seeking God and realizing I needed a savior. As I grew up into my teenage years, life got pretty difficult in just life and being a teenager, and some parts about my parents' testimony. And I just got to a point where I didn't trust anybody. And I was very, very broken. If you knew me, and this is around like 12, 13, so I was hitting all the hormone changes and just changes, period, in my life. If you knew me at that age, you probably wouldn't have realized that anything was going on.
I was saying, did I know you when you were 12 or 13?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I didn't know.
Yeah, like nobody really knew really anything was going on. And a lot of it was internally. I was just struggling with a lot of stuff. And like I said, trust issues, and a lot of trust in my family had kind of been broken at that point. And I was just really not in a good place. At 13, 14 is where I just kind of abandoned God and was just like, you're not doing it for me, and really stepped out of my faith and was like, I got to man up. and I got to do this. If this is what life is going to be like, I guess I just got to do it. I just got to bulldoze my way through life.
Right.
And teenage years really hit me hard with hormones. I mean, I was an emotional basket case. As I grew up, I wouldn't say I cried like I'm a crier, but during that time, like, oh, I cried all the time. Like my mom, like would just be like, "Okay, we're crying again. Like again, we're crying again today."
Did I ever know you when you were crying, or was that like a behind the scenes type of thing?
It was very like behind the scenes.
Okay, so I was say I don't remember that, but
Yeah. And I would say like a lot of people knew me. I mean, I felt like I was pretty outgoing, pretty
yeah,
happy. I mean,
I would say so.
yeah, yeah. But internally, I was dealing with a lot. And I think during that time is where my anxiety started, was about 12, 13. And at some points it would hit me. And I didn't realize how hard my anxiety was hitting me. And it was affecting my schoolwork, it was affecting all my relationships, and then trust issues. I was building up so many walls in my life. And I was like, this is as far as you're going to get with Celeste Miriam or Celeste Giles at that point in my life. It's like, this is it. And I really went down, like I said, a rough patch.
Eternally.
Yes, eternally. And a few more things happened in my home life where trust was just being broken. And I got to a point where I was just crying in the shower. And I was like, God, if this is all life is going to be like, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And I was like, can I please be done? Like, I want to be done. And I look back at that and I'm like, wow, like I didn't realize how much I needed help during that time. And I think my mom really noticed that I needed help, and she really tried to get me into counseling and tried to facilitate that help. But again, I had so many walls up that I was just like, this is as far as you're getting with me. And so in that shower that day, I was just like, can I be done? Like, can I be done? And God was just basically like, no. And he was like, get up off the bathroom floor. And I was like, if I get up, I was like, I can't do it. Like, I was like, I can't do this.
When?
And he was like, get up off the bathroom floor. And so I got up and I was like, I'm up. Like, this is all you're getting from me, And he was like, get dressed, and God really walked me through just step by step in healing from that moment and really full surrender at that point, of just like full surrender in the heart crap, and just a healing process. I really, during that time, hated God. I really did. I was kind of like, you let this happen.
Would you say that like through that moment, like of those couple years or whatever, that like God wasn't like you couldn't see God in your family dynamics? Like, because your childhood, you're like God was present, but like during those times, was God present, or like was like church present? Was
We had somewhat started going back to church.
okay,
But
you were just like
yeah, like I said, I just had so many walls up.
okay,
And like I said, I think my mom, I mean, obviously she kept on pulling, and trying to pour into me.
yeah,
But I had so many walls up that I was just like, absolutely not.
yeah,
And really, I was like, God, and I kind of told God, I was like, you're the only one that can get through to me. And I was like, so either you're going to have to do it or like, I'm done.
yeah,
And I'm not going to say that day I would have chosen suicide,
right,
but I do think if I wouldn't have heard from God during that moment, I do think I would have gone down a path towards that.
really,
Yes, because I was just so broken and so hopeless. And I really hated my life. Like,
really,
I was like, I'm done. I don't want this anymore. And so God got me up off the floor and he was like, we're going to do this. Like, we're going to do this together. And so I was like, well, I still don't really like you, God, because I was really blaming him for a lot of the bad things in my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, you let this happen. You allowed this to happen when you could have stopped it. And so God, from about 13, 14 to about 15, 16 is where God really started healing my relationship with him. And that's where I did start going to a different church, and started getting involved in the youth. That's where I met my now husband, and he started inviting me to all the church stuff. We couldn't hang out unless it was church. And so my parents would let me go to all the church events. And so my husband, like, boyfriend, whatever, was like, let's go to this church thing. Let's go to this church thing. And so we went to this church event, and I actually saw people, like young people, on fire for God. And that was my first time actually seeing that. And it really changed my perspective because I had really just seen a lot of lukewarm Christians up until that point. And I was just like, why? Like, why do we really need God if this is all we're gonna be?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so once I started going to a different church and seeing actual youth on fire for God, I was like, this is what I wanted to be, like this is, and like they can point me of how to get there,
Right.
because they were really on fire for God and shining his light. And like you said in your testimony, you wanted to be like that other person.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to be on them, like on fire for God. I don't want to be a lukewarm Christian anymore, That's just check the box of reading my Bible,
No.
And so my relationship with God really started to heal at that point, and I allowed some of my walls to be broken down for him to heal me in my relationship. And I quit blaming God so much for my hurt and for things that had happened. And I would say that God also took me back from my childhood and took the blinders off, basically, to where I could see where he was involved in every part of my life.
Yeah.
When before I couldn't see that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you weren't there,
Right.
But God was like, no, I was there.
Yeah. I just weren't seeking him.
I just wasn't aware of his presence in some points in my life, especially when I really thought I needed him. I just couldn't feel him, and I couldn't touch him, basically,
Right.
And so God brought me back into that healing journey with him through my teenage years. And that's when I really started to grow a lot in my relationship with him and my healing process with God. And I feel like I really became like a totally different person. I I still deal with anxiety to this day. But that's one journey that I'm still on with him. And growing and yeah. So
Who would you say influenced like that? I know that you saw like the like teenagers or like people our age or your age like on fire for God, but would you say like anybody in your like personal life influence you in like such a way that like like helped you see? Or I'm just curious.
um
Or like maybe Brantley helped you in that way?
yes. Brantley helped me a lot. That's my husband. He always pushed me to be a better me. Even to this day, like he'll be like, "What are you doing to push me here?"
Yeah.
And I've gone to counseling a lot of my um teen to early adulthood. I went to counseling and found a lot of healing in that. But I would say there was a lot of people that poured into me. A lot of people kept pointing me to God. And so I think I needed a lot of people to point me to God, because a lot of people were pointing me there, like, you need them,
Yeah.
but I was still like, no, like, I just had so many walls up. I don't think I listened very well to what they were saying. Right. And so it was ultimately God's voice that pierced through all the walls and was like, no, you really need me in this area and in this area. And so, yeah, I would say Brantley a lot, and he got me back into church and really seeking God. Obviously, my mom kept on pushing me,
Yeah.
and continually wanted me to grow in that.
Yeah.
My whole life, and my grandparents, both sets, grandmother, dog,
Yeah.
granddad, yeah, they they modeled Christianity. So about 16 is when I would say that I was like really on fire for God. 16, 17, 18 is when God was really changing my life and really growing me a lot. All my relationships changed in my life, like for the better.
Mhm.
And I really started like trusting people again and allowing people to like pour into my life there. Um, so at so I graduated high school, um, to 16, 17, 18. So 18, I would say I struggled a little bit more after graduating in the sense of college, just
Okay.
kind of because in high school I was around a lot of Christians
Yeah.
and a lot of people being on fire for God. And then once you get out of high school, you're not in the youth group anymore.
Yeah.
And that really kind of hurt.
Yeah.
And I really needed that community a lot more in college. And so all my college friends really weren't believers or really didn't talk about God. A lot of them pretty lukewarm, weren't Christians at all. It really kind of started affecting me a little bit in just like direction, I guess.
Okay.
Um, and just kind of like, I want to be on fire for God. Where are all the people at? You know?
Where's everybody else?
Yeah, and I just couldn't find that. I really could not find that.
Awful.
And I searched high and low, and a lot of my friends from high school kind of just started drifting away from what they had been believing and what they were doing. And a lot of them started party life in college, and I was not about that. And so I really didn't have any friends during that period.
Did you go to a college group at the church you were going to, or
I did, but it was only once a week.
week? Maybe
Tuesday.
Tuesdays, like that thing?
Yeah, but
Uh,
it was only once a week, only for certain semesters. And then there was like nothing else that you could attend. They had once a week and not really anybody else that I knew went
Yeah.
to the same community college that I was going to. And so I just didn't really have any friends that really prompted me
Right.
in my relationship with God.
Yeah.
To,
Because I don't think we were really like close at that time where we were just kind of like every so often.
yeah,
Then
yeah.
yeah.
And so that was about 18. And then we graduated college, and then I got engaged at that point. And me and you started hanging out a lot more.
Yeah.
And you, I mean,
We were in the same. We
God
got
was
married the same year,
Yeah.
right? So we were getting closer
Mm-hmm.
because we were in the same like aspect of life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like we hung out more then.
Yeah. And I would say, like, you were my only friend during that time.
Yeah.
And then, or one of my only friends, I had another friend, but mine and her um, ways of life really changed after high school.
Yeah.
And so we kind of,
Drifted.
drifted away from each other when it came to like beliefs and morals and stuff. And so got married. Marriage hit me hard when it came to my relationship with God. In the sense of I thought I knew what I was doing, and then I didn't have a clue. I had no clue how to be a wife. I had no clue how to be there for my husband.
Yeah.
And how to support him.
Why do you think that is? Just
I think I was young. I mean, I got married at 19.
yeah.
So I was young, and I just didn't have a clue. I mean, I just didn't.
I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I'm just curious as to, like,
Yeah, I really struggled in the sense of respecting my husband and really leaving and cleaving to him. And there's a lot of other things that made our starting out marriage very difficult. And I mean, that's been a journey. And it comes with loss and grief, part of our marriage. And God has really grown me a lot through that. Because I was just like, I don't know how to be a wife. And then it's like, now we're going through all these hard seasons together. And I was an awful wife. Like, and I'm not just like, no, like I would argue with him all the time. I was disrespectful to him all the time. And Brantley was like, what am I supposed to do with you? And I really realized that a lot of my walls were still up towards my husband. And I did not fully trust my husband. And God really had to point that out and really work with me on that. And I went to counseling a lot about that in my relationship with my husband. And God grew me out of that and started teaching me how to be a better wife.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would say I'm better today. I still got
We
a
have.
lot. I still got a lot of learning to do. Brantley was very patient with me. One thing I will say about Brantley is he leads our family well in the sense of like how we're going to speak to each other respectfully in our household,
Yeah.
and how we're going to go to church and how we're going to push each other to be better and to grow with God. And so he kept on doing that with me, and I was just like, what the heck?
What are we doing here?
Yeah, and eventually he kept on pushing me, and I got there,
Right.
and God helped me get there a lot of it. But I started breaking down those walls towards my husband, and we actually were able to connect, and I got to a point where I could fully trust him.
Yeah.
And so God really helped me through that point. And when it came to loss and grief that we experienced, that was a whole new relationship with God that I got to experience in loss and grief.
Yeah.
And also watching the people that I love go through it.
Right.
And it was a full surrender to God. There was parts where I was just like, what are we doing? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And God really, a supernatural peace came into our marriage and into our family. And God really helped Brantley and I grow a lot together and then also apart during that time. And I would say, since I got married, which has been 5 years, I am a completely different person.
Right.
Like, if you knew
Yeah.
me when we first got married, like, I'm sorry. I was probably a jerk, honestly, because I was so mature and just had so many
Yeah.
walls up. And now I'm like a completely different person.
For the better.
Yeah,
sure.
for the better. Like, God has grown me and put me, and I've gone through a lot of crap.
Yeah.
And life, I mean, just sucks. I mean,
It does.
we're here, and life just sucks sometimes.
Yeah.
But God does not suck, and God is powerful and healing and wonderful. And like I said, He can work everything for His good. And when I look back on my life from my childhood to now, I can see how He's been working
Yeah.
all these trials throughout my life to the point where I am today and
Right.
who I am today. One thing Brantley says all the time, and for him to like kind of just punch you for saying that, is like, I'll tell him, I wish we didn't have to go through this. I wish we didn't have to go through these trials. And my husband's always like, I don't. And I'm like, what? Why would you say that? And he's like, because God has a purpose for it. And as soon as you stop believing that God has a purpose for your pain, is when you give up on your hope that God's going to do something in your life. And so I would say a lot through my testimony. I gave up a lot throughout the years of like, I'm just not going to get there, God. Like, count me out. I'm done. But God kept on pushing and kept on pushing me, and I kept on allowing Him to also.
Right.
And
You surrender.
mhm.
Allowing like him to direct your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. As a mom now, I'm like, okay, now what am I doing with my life? Like,
This podcast.
yeah, this podcast. But also, I'm like, okay, this is a whole nother type of surrender that I'm having to get to.
And learning
Yeah.
more about him and like directing our conversations too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being intentional about, I mean, obviously my son's young, but just being intentional about the prayers that I pray over him and being intentional about the prayers that I pray over our family. Just not just protection, but also like that he may have a soft heart to the Lord, all the days of his life, and just trying to become a prayer warrior for our family. And God's been growing me into that. So yeah, that's the good.
That was good. I enjoyed it. I think that we saw that you had like ups and downs a lot in your life, and that you like, even though you were hurting in the later in life, that it really, I guess, showed that you were still like you were still open to hear God's voice, even though you were struggling. And I applaud you for that, because I know that that was a hard time.
Yeah.
And I just know that he was using that time to really grow you, like you said, in your marriage, but also as a person.
Yeah.
And that's hard to come out of that in a good state.
Yeah.
Because like our trials, like that we do go through, it's important how we like walk through them and like show how we're walking through.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay to have your like moments where you're like breaking down. Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, just kind of showing like going through it all, like light through the hurt.
Yeah. Like, is it going to break you and break your faith, Or is it going to make you stronger in the end? And you have to choose that. Like, that's a choice.
It is. And it's a hard choice.
Yes. And several times I've had to be faced with that, especially with loss and grief. And I was like, no, like, I'm going to choose to let it be for the better,
Yeah.
And you have to choose that. And it's a hard choice, and it's not an easy choice. Like we said, life sucks.
Yeah.
But also with God, there's so much joy. And once I actually started relying on God and he opened my eyes, I could see the joy in my life.
Yeah.
When beforehand I could not see any joy or happiness. And so joy really comes from the inside and what's there. And it comes from God.
And choosing to like express your joy or choosing to be joyful.
Yeah.
Is like, you have to choose that, like struggling with being happy.
Yeah.
I think it's a choice to like, I choose to be happy today.
Yeah.
So it's very good.
Being powerful of your emotions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah,
I think it's for listening, which I didn't hear. I mean, I've heard some bits and pieces, like you've heard some bits and pieces of mine, but I'm glad to know like the full thing. And I think that brings us, closer in our friendship.
Yeah.
Because, I didn't know that you were struggling so much in your preteen years. And I guess if I would have known that like then, I don't know if I would have been able to help you.
Yeah.
I wish, and I hope if you ever like are going through that again, that you can, come to me, or, we can build each other up better.
Yeah. And like you said last time, you kind of see people, and I would say I was definitely a seemed happy teenager.
Yeah.
And so I think it's easy to look at other people's life and be like, they're not going through that.
Yeah.
When actually I was like hurting depths of it.
I guess you just don't know truly what people are going through. And that's for a Christian. I mean, we may not know what someone's going through, like personally and deeply. That's why we need to be nice to people and watch what we say. Because like, what if I had said something to you like jokingly and you took it totally different?
Yeah.
And so I guess it's really important to what we say and like how we say it to people to like direct their lives when they go home.
Yeah.
That's very scary to think about, but it's so true.
And as Christians, we really have to pay attention to what light we're shining. And that we are supposed to be a light to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not allowing God to shine through us, like might not be reaching the people that God wants us to reach, and that need to be reached.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Great. So if you are scared about sharing your testimony with, your friend or family member, I would encourage you to do that. Share, like, talk to yourself in the mirror, or just like go over like how God has possibly like changed you, and like what because like I've thought about my testimony, just like different parts of it, and throughout like this week or 2 weeks, and just wanting to get it like down, not down, but like I want to,
the critical point.
yeah, critical points need to be spoken and like talked about. And I encourage, everyone else to just really, speak your testimony like it's everyday language.
Yeah.
So we can share with someone who might need it.
Yeah.
And but if you have any questions or comments about Celeste's testimony or even my testimony, comment.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it.
Yeah. And if you're struggling with anything that might be similar to mine or Sarah's testimony, please message us.
Yeah.
We would love to connect with you or give you resources of community or pastors that you can reach out to and talk to.
Most definitely.
And again, if you don't have a relationship with God, like I said last week, just start a conversation with Him.
We encourage you to start a conversation, or just like talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
Talk to someone who's a Christian, and then, or just reach out to us, because we always have something to say.
But please, don't hesitate. Start a relationship with God today. It's very important. And like I said, this podcast is all about growing in the in-between. And so we're growing, and we encourage you to do the same.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of In Between Podcasts. Don't forget to mark your calendars for next Monday at 4 p.m. because we'll be back with more stories, insights, and inspiration. Show us some love by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to us. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicide or mental health, please seek help. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Line at 1-800-273-8255 or dial 988. You can also reach out to the mental health professional. Remember, you are not alone and there is help available. We love growing with our followers and appreciate your support, and hope our discussion has been meaningful to you. We would love to hear your testimonies or stories of growth. Feel free to share them with us. See you next Monday.